Welcome to Completing the Puzzle with Jason DeFranco. I'm your host, Matt Doolittle. This week, with Mr. Jason DeFranco,
Me.
we are continuing our series of, it's a 6-series episode. It's something you put together. And this one is going to be adapting to change.
Right.
So we're going from seizing the initiative to planning to win. And how do you adapt to change as you're going through that process?
Exactly.
Just
Oh, is that a question?
It is a question.
Oh.
Like, how do you adapt to it?
That's a big question. We should do like a whole episode on that.
That's
Oh,
what
that's
we're
right.
doing.
We are. So when you're at that point, after you have seized the initiative, you've gotten going, after you have planned how you're going to move forward, you start moving forward, and you have to remember rule number 1.
And what's that?
Nothing ever goes according to the plan.
You know what? I can adhere to that. You always have to have a plan Z.
Yep.
You have a plan A, then you have a plan Z. So how do you put that together where you're like, oh, I have this series of things that are going, essentially something is going to go wrong.
Yes.
So how do you plan for that?
First of all, you buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be a bumpy ride, you know? You've got to know that whatever you've got planned is going to get derailed in some way, shape, or form. You just accept that from the beginning. Don't be in denial about it. Don't pretend that you crafted a perfect plan and you're going to execute it flawlessly, because that never happens. If you do, your plan was too small. You know, I can craft a perfect plan to put my socks on in the morning, but I can't craft a perfect plan to dominate a market.
Well, what do you mean
by product?
What do you mean by your plan being too small?
If you do something perfectly, you're not doing something interesting enough.
Okay, so translating that into, you thought everything was going to be perfect. This was going to be fantastic. It's going to go from number 1 to number 2 to number 3. Then something goes wrong and you don't know how to adapt to it.
Yeah, and if you start out knowing that the plan is a framework, you get as much detail as you can, but it's a framework. And along the way, things are going to come up. They're going to screw with your plan. Knowing that, you can look at it differently than if you thought the perfect plan was just going to take care of itself now.
So let's look at that framework as you had here at Team Solutions Dental, which is the overall company that we have. What was your framework for everything starting?
Well, there was a growth plan. You know, we've talked about everything that went into the planning of a business plan and where the resources were going to come from, where the people were going to come from, what kinds of things we were going to do differently as time went by. And we had goals, we had numbers, we had positions, we had all kinds of stuff like that. But none of it went exactly according to plan. We reached the destination, but all kinds of things from the plan. Oh, we got more work this month than we intended to according to plan, so we've got to hire 2 people earlier than the plan called for. That's a pretty minor one. That's a pretty easy one until you start to run out of money. Because, for example, we had a financial plan. We knew what it was going to cost to hire people and produce the work so that we didn't run out of money as we grew, because that's a danger when a company grows. Most companies, startups especially, they're undercapitalized. You don't have 6 months' worth of your expenses in the bank when you do a startup. You have what you can scrape together. So when you start hiring people, you've got to pay them right away. And they're producing work that you might send out a statement for at the end of the month. And then you might get paid on that statement next month, or sometimes the month after, depending on the economy and the customer. So now you've shelled out the money to buy the materials, and you've paid the people to do the work, and you've produced the work, but it might be a couple months before you get paid. How are you supposed to keep paying for those people while you wait for the money to come in? Well, that's part of the plan. You plan ahead, and you know when to add people based upon the cost of those people. The problem is, when the work came in faster than even we expected, we had to hire people ahead of schedule. And you can't, your nest egg for 3 people is very different than your nest egg for 12 people. 12 people eat through that money a lot faster.
Well, and is that a good problem to plan for, or to make, to adapt to that change when more work comes in than you're expecting?
Well, how could it be a bad problem? You're growing. That's got to be good, right? Well, or is it? Uncontrolled growth. Uncontrolled growth is a problem. by definition. It's one of the biggest problems in startups because almost any growth is uncontrolled when you're first starting out. So you have these people that launch a business, and the business is doing really well. I mean, supremely well. They're killing it. Everyone knows they're killing it. They're having a great year. And then tax season comes around, and they owe more money in taxes than they have in the bank. Because the way taxes are calculated, the way profit is calculated, you owe taxes on money you don't have. And I don't know how many businesses go under from that one thing alone. The first year they have a good year, they go, I did great. Yeah, I've got 50 grand in the bank. And the tax bill comes and it's 70 grand. They go, wait, how can I owe more in taxes than I took in? Well, that's the beauty of the IRS and how those things are structured. And virtually every small business person I've ever talked to has been in that boat. The first year they have a good year, they're totally unprepared for how the tax structure changes and how much more money they owe than they ever would have thought possible.
And how does a startup, an entrepreneur, how do they look out for that?
Get help. That's part of the planning. That is, ask professionals. Have a good accountant. Explain how it works.
Is that a main thing for the plan?
Oh,
to have
God,
a good
yeah.
accountant? Because
Absolutely.
I know, like I went and got I went and got an MBA and all this and everything just to basically figure out how to not get screwed by the tax people. But like, is that something you look at and go, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. That's not something I do. Like you work in the philosophy and you work at the technical side of the business. Is that something where you're like, I just don't want to deal with that?
I thought it was interesting because I like numbers, but tax accounting is not math. It's voodoo. It is a giant game with a bunch of secret rules that you can never find all the rules on your own. You need a professional to do that part of it.
I mean, what do they say? The two things in life are death and taxes. Those are the only things that are ever going to come around. So what do you do when all hell breaks loose in one of those situations? So like you've got your plan, you're at your 3-year mark, but the biggest thing in the world right now is COVID stuff. Mm-hmm. That's a big hell breaking loose. How do you kind of look at that and go, we're going to restructure and have to lay off people, but also keep them on, but also keep in the business? Like, how do you look at that as a business professional?
Well, every problem's different. That's a very specific problem. You start with the overall intent. I've got a plan, but I know the plan's not going to cover all the variables that can happen out there. Plan for a lot. Plan for more than you think you can. And still remember, things are going to happen you can't prepare for. And have that mindset. When things start to go wrong, you don't give up your destination. You change course, but you don't change destinations. If you're sailing and you're sailing into a storm, you may tack around the storm. You may be redirecting in the short term, but it doesn't change where you're trying to get to. So you've got to look at what's happening and see what it does to your destination. If the destination is still a constant, if, yes, these bad things have happened, but we still want to do this thing. The plan is to get us from point A to point B. We still want to get to point B. This doesn't change anything except how we get there. Then you'll be a lot more resourceful automatically because you're keeping your mind open. You're staying aware of options. If you thought the plan was going to cover everything, this looks like a catastrophe, no matter what the disruption is. It doesn't have to be a huge thing like COVID. It could be a small thing. It could be a financial thing. It could be a people thing. People surprise you all the time. You have a great plan. I have done this perfect fantasy football team. Well, that's great in fantasy football. But when you're talking about real live people, employees, people coming to work every day, things happen. Someone has a death in the family. You didn't plan for that. They're out for the next 3 days. You didn't plan for that. Your plan doesn't include that. So now you have to adapt. Well, you have people come in early. You have people stay late. You do some more work yourself. You work past that. That's a minor disruption usually. But you start adding those things up. You start adding up. This person had a death in the family. That person got a flat tire. Today, some supplies were back ordered. We couldn't get them in on time. And there's a constant stress of little things attacking the integrity of your plan.
So outside of COVID, as it's affected almost every business in the world, what has been maybe the biggest thing that caused you to go off your plan? or the smallest thing where you were like, we need to look into this more?
Well, one was when we needed to move into a new building. That one kind of went off the rails. We've talked about that before, about the build out process and conflict about what could and couldn't be done in this building. And it was a real challenge because we were 6 months and $40,000 into the project, only to find out that someone else was telling us we couldn't proceed the way we wanted to. And we had to reset. And what we said was, does this change the destination? The destination is to grow to a certain size, to have certain capabilities, to have certain facilities, to have a great location that's convenient to people, that can host everybody in a good way. And no, none of that changed. But this one isn't going to work. And it reached a point where we knew we were pulling the plug on that deal. And that's an interesting concept, because when things start to go wrong with your plan and you have to adapt, there is a tendency among people to either just continue blindly forward or to cancel the whole thing, to say, oh, it didn't work. Seth Godin wrote a great little book about it called The Dip. And it's the concept that everything is going to run into some kind of complication that you don't foresee. You're going to start out great and something's going to go wrong. And when that something goes wrong, the vast majority of people bail. They go, oh, apparently this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is the grass is always greener, people.
So they give up.
They give up, or they set a lower goal. That's a common one. That's happening right now in COVID. Right now with COVID, I see articles everywhere, and I hear it in the industry. I hear it in other industries. People saying, well, you have to reset your expectations. You got to take the new normal into consideration and realize we can't do what we used to do. But I hear people using it as an excuse. They're using it as an excuse to not try harder.
To get out of trouble, to get out of their business.
Or to just not expect good performance. To say, well, we didn't have a very good year, but COVID. I mean, we didn't have a very good year. We were flat, first time ever. We didn't grow last year. And it was stressful, and everyone told us, hey, flat is up during COVID, unless you're producing something needed in COVID. Those people had a windfall. But, well, so why weren't you doing something that was needed in COVID, is the question. It's the difference between, yeah, but that's my plan, and I can't make money with my plan, and saying, well, something has changed. I got to revisit my plan. Maybe my plan's still okay with a few modifications. Maybe I need to adapt for the short term and then get back on track with it. Or maybe I need to reset the plan. But people way too often are at one extreme or the other. They either say, oh, I'm going to ignore this problem because I have a plan. Or, and they're denying reality. They're not being realistic. Or they go the other way and they say, well, this has changed everything. I have to cancel my plan. I have to give up on my dream. No, that's not the right answer.
Yeah.
But there's a realistic analysis you have to go through to say, has this done such dramatic harm or created such a radically different circumstance that I need to change my goal? If so, change your goal. But way too often right now, I'm hearing people just say, well, we're just not going to do as well because. Okay, well, that's dumb. Mm-hmm. Adapt your plan. Adjust to what's real now. There's no reason why you can't still be successful if you figure out how. You got all these restaurants that had no business, no customers. Well, okay, they're dead, right? Well, not so much. You have all these restaurants doing ghost kitchens and delivery that never did it before. Some of them are doing better doing it that way because they're better at food preparation and delivery than they were at the service experience inside their own dining room. Some restaurants are making more money in this setting than in the other because their adaptation made it work better.
They're spending the money on that delivery. They're doing all the things that need to happen.
Yeah.
So how often do you revisit your initial plan?
I look at it regularly, about once a week. Just check back on the plan, see if it still makes sense. Are we on track? That kind of thing. Because generally the plan is larger in scope, and then I'll have smaller benchmarks. But if in a given week we're not on the plan, that doesn't mean the plan's failing. It means we're making an adjustment this week so that the plan continues to be valid.
And is that important for someone out there who's building a plan to always kind of come back to it? And you have a couple business partners here at Team Solutions with Chad and Borden. Like, how often do you guys kind of get together and go, hey, what's your vision of the plan versus mine, and then come together in like an idea of where we're going to go?
Once a year, we have like a strategic planning session to say, are we doing what we intend? Have we been, lots of times when you're walking in the woods, you go around a tree, and then you go around another tree, and then you go around another tree, and you realize you're back where you started because the landmarks aren't clear enough, and small changes in direction add up over time. That's why people get lost in the woods or unfamiliar settings like that. They don't realize they've turned completely around. They think they just stepped around a tree. They don't realize they were off 20 degrees.
They go Blair Witch
after that
Project
tree.
on it.
Yeah. But so you need to do the course correction back onto the path. So once a year, we get together and do strategic planning where we talk about how is this year going, what's the plan for next year, that kind of thing. And we do that within the context of the larger plan. The larger plan is 3 to 5 years at a time. And then each year we get together. And, I mean, we check pretty much continually. But once a year, we get together for a full day or a full weekend and hash out what has worked, what hasn't, what does it mean for the plan. Are there new opportunities that we couldn't see when we wrote the plan that now we need to add to it? Are there new challenges that we couldn't see that we needed to adapt to and change expectations? Or is the plan going according to plan and we just need to get, militant about staying disciplined with it?
I mean, obviously, there's, financial numbers that you can see when a plan has gone bad. You can see when a people plan has gone bad. But when do you finally realize this ain't going too good and we need to fix this? Like, we need to change. Like, have you ever had to do that here? Have you had to do that in any of your other businesses? Like, have you had to make that change?
Oh, sure. You have to. But it's a matter of being pragmatic. It's a matter of being, optimistically realistic. You have to say, good things are going to happen. I believe it. I think this is going to work. Then you got to be realistic about it. When things are going wrong, you got to take yourself out of the situation, move back. And that's why the plan's good. If you're looking at, wow, today's a mess. Oh, my God, the plan's falling apart. And then you step back and look at a year. And you go, oh, one day over the course
Just
of a
one day
year
didn't matter.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter, no matter how bad that one day was. But there's metrics you can use, but it's more about philosophy. In my mind, it's always the why. Why are you doing it? How far is this taking off from where you wanted it to be? You look at historical examples of people adapting to change. Apollo 13 is the classic example of everything goes wrong. Nothing is going to go according to plan. Now what? Mm-hmm. And in their case, they scrapped the entire plan. The entire mission got scrubbed. They weren't going where they were going. Now it's just about getting home. So they reset the expectation, and then all effort was driven towards the new expectation. We need a plan to get them home safe. How are we going to do that? And it's a fantastic story. The movie does it justice, actually.
Putting in the filter into into a square box. Yeah.
Yep.
And we're both. I consider myself an astronaut. I went to space camp, so officially, if we ever have to, leave the Earth, I can fly a spaceship. And you're pretty big into space too. So I think that looking at that type of era, of how those guys just had to adapt to, let's figure it out.
Yep.
Is an important part. And have you applied that to the business?
Constantly. Things go wrong, and I say, what's the objective? Where do we need to get to? We're not losing an American on my watch. Mm-hmm. What is critical? Critical is always about people and reputation. Equipment will break. You can replace it. You can't replace a bad response from a client. You can't replace a person not wanting to work here because they had a bad experience. It's about managing the right things. So if something isn't going to be destructive to a person, you have to dial down its importance. Everyone looks at dollars. It's the profit. It's the sales. It's this. Well, of course it is. It's a business, and that's the fuel for the business. But the engine for the business is the people. And if you're doing something that doesn't work with the people, then you better be rethinking the plan. And most of our plans have key components about people. So if it is a problem with logistics, if it is a problem with equipment, if it is a problem with supplies, any of those things automatically get dialed down in my head. Someone comes in and says, we got a problem. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is it? It's a 7. Okay, what's it have to do with? Logistics. Okay, it's not a 7, it's a 5. If they come in and say, I got a problem, it's a 7. What's the problem? One of the managers just got a phone call. His kid was in a car accident. He's got to go. Okay, that's not a 7, that's a 9 because it's people-based. Mm-hmm. I always bump up the significance of problems that have to do with people and dial down the problems that have to do with logistics or supplies or things like that.
And is that when you feel that you maybe have to interject yourself? Because I know you put a lot on your leadership, your management team here to kind of deal with stuff on their own before they have to make that phone call.
Absolutely.
And do you think that is important for, somebody starting a business that to go, look, I'm going to rely on you to make the right decision, but when do you finally feel like you have to interject yourself into that change?
I've got thresholds when it's over a certain dollar amount. If this is more than a $10,000 problem, hang on, let me see it, Mm-hmm. Again, people. If this is a chance that we're going to lose an employee or lose a customer, I want to know what's going on before it happens or before action is taken, because things that impact people are too important to trust that something will work out okay. But the other thing is you have to prepare people to make decisions. You don't just blindly trust. You don't say, well, you're in charge, you do what you think is right. You have to teach them. You have to prepare them. You have to teach them your philosophy. You have to teach them your priorities. You have to make sure they share those. You have to have a shared vision. You have to have an alignment of purpose and methods. If you've got those things, then you can trust them, and you trust them a little bit at first. You give them small things and see how they do. When they struggle, you teach them what they struggled with. When they get it right, you point out why they got it right, and then you give them bigger things. And just keep building on that and figure out what their tolerance is for risk.
So you just kind of touched on it a little bit. Your kind of teaching method, and I know you push philosophy a lot. Like what? Well. I mean, it's important. The culture of the company. You spent a lot of time on the mission, vision, and values, and that's important. And I've seen that and how much you push it out there. But like when you're training somebody to be a new leader, what do you kind of zero in on? Hey, watch this in this employee, or I'm going to watch this in you to make them become a better person.
I usually do it in reverse. I usually use examples that they bring me. So make up a person. Joe is a new manager, and Betty works for Joe. And Joe is frustrated by Betty because she doesn't pay enough attention when he's trying to tell her something. Till Joe doesn't pay attention to something I'm telling him. And I say, you know how it bugs you when Betty does that thing? And he says, yeah. I say, you're doing that thing. I try to look for those situations where the roles are reversed so I can teach them to understand it. So now I can teach Joe, now why weren't you listening to me? Well, because I was afraid that something was going on over here. Right, so you were distracted by something that you thought might be important. Do you think that's the case with Betty when you talk to her? Could it be that she thinks something as important as being distracted by that? Learn from the reversal of the roles there so that you can handle it in a way that makes sense. Also, remember how you felt when I busted you just now. That's how she feels when you bust her. So you've got to put that into your thinking as you're talking to her.
And how important is it in the plan, that you're going forward, you've got the initiative going, you're going for the win, for the people side of it, like getting an idea of who you want to have work for you. How important is that?
Well, it's critical. It's everything. That's why the values are always the first thing we talk about. Because if people share our values, we can figure it out. If they don't, we can't. It's black and white. And it's so simple to say and so hard to do every single day. But that's how it has to be done. You have to make sure that it's a values match, that they share the objectives that you have, that they share the ideals that you have. And if people agree about those things, you can figure out everything else is details. People, they come in and they want to talk about pay. Obviously, they're looking for a job. They'd like to know how much it's going to pay, and I give them a range. But I tell them, the amount you want to be paid is far less important to me than you being the kind of person that belongs on this team. If you're the kind of person that belongs on this team, there's wiggle room. You know, if you've got some number in your head, just tell me what it is. I'll tell you whether or not it's reasonable. But it doesn't matter if you don't fit this team. And it doesn't matter what you want if it does fit this team.
And, what have you been able to learn from some of the biggest fails in the plan? Like, have you ever looked at something and gone, I can learn a lesson from that? Like, what was kind of the biggest lesson you've learned from failing through that plan?
Always. There's always something to learn. And the biggest thing is always there were clues.
So you saw a progression of it getting bad.
I could have predicted this would have happened if I'd paid attention to the clues, whether that's people's reactions to something, whether that's shifts in the market. And every time you hear a company say, oh, well, there was a change in the market and it killed our business or whatever, then you weren't paying attention. That's just reality. The number of times that some radical, unforeseen technology or innovation or competitive presence came in and destroyed a business or a host of businesses and no one saw it coming is unheard of. It's like meteors hitting the earth. It doesn't happen that often. Those things are all predictable. Kodak got killed by digital.
Oh, they knew that was coming.
Kodak had the digital product. Kodak was the originator of digital film technology. And they boxed it. They said, no one's going to want to get away from film. They like paper pictures. They like printed pictures. They're not going to want to have pictures on a computer or something. They want them in a photo album. Film is king. And they took a digital camera technology and put it on a shelf for 20 years. And they don't exist. I mean, they exist. They're 1% of whatever they were. Mm. They don't exist.
It's like Netflix and Blockbuster. Mm-hmm. Like Blockbuster had it, and then they let it go. They could have bought Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, if you're paying attention, you can see it coming. You may not get every guess right, but the things that totally disrupt an industry, the things that put companies out of business, are almost always predicted. Almost always.
So I think that's a big part of even this market, the dental lab market and everything that's going on with this company. How big is it staying ahead of the technology that's coming along so fast? I mean, you look at the development of even DVDs from VHS. It was 15, 20 years before it finally hit there. Now it's almost every year something new is taking over technology. So how invested are you in making sure you're ahead of that technology game?
Very. I mean, we wait until something is proven because the things that we make are not experiments. They're prosthetics. They're going in someone's body, so they have to be right. So we wait until a material is proven. Once it's proven, if it's a good leap forward, we're in. We're always in. If it's proven, but it's a modest improvement, it's these incremental increases in quality or efficiency or strength, we're not interested because we want to master a technology. So we don't just grab every new thing that comes along because you can't get great at it that way. We wait, we measure, we watch, we listen, we figure out which things are going to go well and get involved in those and get all the way in. Learn everything we can about them, become experts at the tool, the technology, the printer, the whatever it is. Because there's a huge investment in buying the technology, but there's a bigger investment in the people getting great at it. So you can't waste that investment by just jumping on the latest, trend every 6 months. You have to watch them carefully. And we've been burned. Everybody has. We've been burned. The first 3D printer we bought, we never printed anything on it.
Really?
We had the thing for 3 years. I mean, we printed some tchotchkes and stuff.
Yeah.
But we never got it to work well enough that we trusted it for a dental application.
And is part of that plan, and I know we've got a couple, great leaders here that just dive into the technology when something new shows up.
Sure.
Do you just kind of trust them to do it, or do you do your own research on that piece of equipment that you just spent, $100,000 on, and we just put that in the lab and we're going to see how it works?
A little bit of both. It depends on the situation. If it's a technology that somebody else is already an expert on, I trust their judgment. If it's something new that we're bringing in that we've never done before, I do a lot of research myself, and then I look for people who are credible, either people that I know and trust or people that have great reputations, not just in this industry, in whatever industry, where I can get some background. I go find an expert, I go find a guru, and I go, why will this thing work, and what should I worry about not working? And that's gone well.
And I think that's an important rule for everybody out there is you've got to find the people, as you grow a business, that you're not just two guys in a lab putting teeth together, is you've got to build out that team. As far as putting that plan together and finally getting to the end of that, where do you think an entrepreneur should start? Where should they start with an end game, or should they start with just launch it?
Oh, I begin with the end in mind. I always say you got to know how it's going to end. When we opened the business, we met with a contract attorney and sat down and discussed, how do we think the business will end? I mean, it sounds like a question, but the reality is everything ends. And we said, well, we don't want it to end. We want to be successful. Says, okay, well, 50 years from now, you'll sell it to somebody, or it'll go public, or you'll give it to your kids, or whatever. And that's an end to your part in the story. So how do you want that to go? So even in those kinds of terms, we have very lengthy, very specific contract drawn up that says how things go if one of us wants to stop doing this.
Yeah.
How things go if the company is acquired. How things go if it acquires other companies. We've got all these things spelled out about the expectations because we know everything ends. So we put a plan together, and my plan is very clear, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows that someday the company will be sold because we will never be big enough to go public. You have to be multi-billion-dollar company to go public successfully in a manufacturing kind of space like we are. It's different if you're in tech or idea spaces, but in a manufacturing production setting like this, you got to be a $3 billion company to justify the costs of going public. Well, I don't anticipate reaching that size. Maybe I'm just not ambitious enough. I don't know.
Put that on the 9-year plan.
Yeah, it's longer. So, and we don't expect the company to close because we fight too hard. We're too tough a competitor. We're too stubborn to give up. We'll find a way. So that leaves acquisition. Someday, this company will be bought. Maybe it'll be bought by another company. Maybe it'll be bought by the employees. Maybe it'll be bought by another dental technician who wants to own something bigger. Who knows? But someday it will be acquired. So we came up with the terms under which it would be acquired in the future someday. In general terms, things like, well, if we are ever acquired, we want to be what's called a pedestal acquisition. We're not a fold-in. We're not, I just want some more business, so I bought your company and combined it with mine. No, it's a standalone entity that is doing so well that people go, God, let's buy that and make ours more like them. That we wanted to be this mecca, this ivory tower kind of thing.
It's setting that example of how you want this to go, right?
Yep, exactly. And the idea that, well, number one, they'll pay top dollar because it's that kind of an acquisition. This isn't just a book of business in a building. This is all kinds of training systems and service systems. It's a philosophy, it's a culture, it's an identity that the people share. This is a living, breathing organism that I want to have this be mine, kind of thing. So there's a bunch of things that we do differently than other people. There's a bunch of the systems that we build that are there to ensure that if anything ever happens, this is best in class. If Chad and I both get in a car crash and we're both vegetables and the determination
God
is made,
forbid.
it's, the company is going to be sold, we want someone to come in not like a vulture on a corpse. We want someone to come in begging the people to say yes because they want them so bad. That we want the kind of organization that if some big company acquires us, first thing they do is start elevating our senior people. To say, yeah, I know, you've been running that facility, we'd like you to run the whole region now because the way it's done there is the way we wish it was done everywhere. And they look at our training systems and say, you know what? Those are the systems we're going to copy everywhere else. And who's running those systems? Well, let's put that person as our national director of education, things like that. Our media, hey, wait, those guys have they got these podcasts and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's take those people and make a national media center for all of our businesses. That kind of thing is the thinking I want to happen if someone looks at our business one day.
And is that an unexpected evolution of the plan?
No, that was from the beginning, day one.
So you had that in mind that you were going to build up that
Day
way.
one, how is this going to end? And we said what I just said. It's not going to close because we'll never give up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be big enough to go public, which means the only alternative is someone will buy it. Okay, how do we want that to go? Because I'm going to do all this work, build all this up, and then watch someone buy it and run it into the ground or buy it and treat people badly or whatever. This is a cause. This is a mission.
Because you invested a lot in the people.
Oh, yeah.
You invest a lot in the people. You've set time aside. We've talked about this. You have an hour a week where or even today, we've got a shadower and you've been doing this weekly. So I think that's a big part of the plan. And was that in there for the investment in the people?
Absolutely. Customers too. We said we're going to get people who are untrained. We're going to spend a lot of time and money teaching them, and that's okay. We want to do it that way. Occasionally, we'll get a trained person because certain trained people have incredible value. But in general, you end up having to train a lot of bad habits away. So rather than start with a whole host of people who are skilled, but maybe don't do it our way, think about it differently, have bad habits, instead of doing any of that, we made the plan that the majority of the people we hire will come in at entry level and be trained by us. That's a huge investment. Same thing with customers. We said we're going to have tough customers. We're going to have customers sometimes who maybe their training's not good enough and they're asking us to do things because they don't understand them or they're just very difficult to please. We said, how are we going to deal with that? And we said, we like that. We've got three kinds of customers: impossible, difficult, and easy. Impossible are just people who are unreasonable. That's a different category. It's people that don't want to pay their bill or don't want to pay a fair price for what you make after the fact or things like that.
I don't deal with the customers directly, but I've heard things.
Yeah. So there is unreasonable. We just don't really want to deal with those people.
Yeah.
Easy is just that. It's easy. It's fun. It's nice. You're glad you have customers that are just happy all the time. That's a great thing to have. But it's not very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult customers are very interesting because each one, you have to get to know them. You have to understand what they're looking for. You have to figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are and how they relate to what you do with them. And if you take a difficult customer and thrill them, they will never leave because they know they're a difficult customer. They know they're demanding. They know they're hard to please. But they're not impossible. They're not unreasonable. They just have very high expectations. Those are my favorite customers because once we do please them, they'll never leave. They say, this is worth something. They recognize the value. I see how hard you work to make sure I'm happy, and I appreciate that. Those are the best customers ever.
And do you think even doing that with the customers and doing that with the people is how you push that culture as part of the plan?
Absolutely. That was from the beginning. We are going to overinvest. If we have a customer that we're not making money on because of technical limitations, because of their understanding of products, because they need help with something on their side, we're not going to discard them because we're losing money. We're going to invest in them, spend time with them to help them, because we believe if we do help them, they'll recognize it and never forget it.
And is that helping the company learn better from that experience of,
Oh, sure.
you've got a difficult customer where they're giving you all these kind of problems, but where are we missing on making them happy so
Right.
that the next time we don't have to do that?
Yeah. When someone from up front tells me, a customer's not happy, I say, what did we do? They automatically want to say, well, they're just being, mean or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, there's a reason for it. Is any of this our fault? Let's assume it's all our fault first.
It's on our side.
Then let's look at everything and prove that to not be true. We'll look at the benefit of doubt is the customer. The customer's always right. That's customer's wrong as often as they're right. But they need to feel like they're right. You need to give them the benefit of the doubt that they might be right. And you need to do everything you can to make them happy even if they're wrong. And if they're wrong, you got to be fair and let them know what they're wrong about so that they can adjust something. Mm-hmm. Most people won't do that. They're afraid of their customers. But that means you never get close to them. It means you never build a relationship with them. If you're just telling them what they want to hear all the time, that might be easier, but it's not healthier. And long term, it ends up being a problem.
And then it spreads, and they talk to their buddy and everything. Have you ever? And you just mentioned something that, and we'll kind of wrap it up here. Have you ever been afraid of a customer? Have you ever had a client that you're like, oh, for the love of baby Christmas, I don't want to deal with this person?
Like personally afraid, or
Yeah,
afraid
or-
of losing their business? Or?
I don't know that it would be the business, but just like, oh, I don't want to deal with this person. And how do you kind of adapt to that?
No, I tell them I don't think we should work together. If I feel that bad about someone I'm doing business with, then something's wrong with the relationship.
And you've brought it up that you're happy to fire a client.
Yeah, I don't call it that, but
Well, let them just not work with them anymore.
you have a frank and honest conversation.
Yeah.
You tell them, look, we're not making you happy, and you're frustrating the heck out of us. It's not good for either one of us. And it might be our fault, it might be your fault, but we have put in the effort to try to fix it, and it's not getting fixed. I don't want to be a source of frustration for you, and I don't want you to be a source of frustration for me.
It's a waste of
Why don't we
time
just-
and money
why
for
don't we just
everybody,
part
right?
ways? Yeah.
At that point,
It
it's
doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a fight. It's not a. That's why I don't like fire a customer. I'm like,
let them go.
usually they're paying you. It's hard to fire someone that's paying you.
Yeah.
It's like I don't remember last time an employee fired me because I pay them, not the other way around. So there's a thing there. But seriously, if the relationship isn't working, it doesn't make sense to keep going because sooner or later you will be fed up with each other, and then it's unfriendly. Let's just point it out and deal with what's real.
And then move on from there. So let's wrap it up here. So to any like entrepreneur or somebody that's out there starting a business, what would you say is the main thing for them to do to adapt to change right off the bat from day one?
Michael Jordan and Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison had 6,000 failed experiments trying to invent the light bulb. Michael Jordan, his statistics in an interview one time, he says, I have missed 9,000 shots, I've lost 300 games, and 26 times had the ball in my hand for the game-winning shot and missed. And yet they're both icons.
And still took the shot.
Well, he still took the shot. Things go wrong. Then what? Don't worry about the fact that things go wrong. They do. They will. Plan for it. Prepare yourself for it mentally, psychologically. Just be ready for it. It's going to go wrong in some way you didn't think of. If you thought of it, that would have been the plan. It's going to go wrong in some way you didn't think of. Just make sure your plan is still valid. Make sure whatever has changed doesn't make the plan or the goal invalid. If the goal is still valid, all you need to do is figure out how to get past this hurdle and then the next one.
And is it to have that mentality to just move on from a
Yes.
failure?
Absolutely. Not just move on.
Learn
and move on.
And move on.
Always.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you for watching and listening to Completing the Puzzle with Mr. Jason DeFranco. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And a big thing we're pushing right now is put down in the comments, leave us some questions so we can start answering them. We start involving you in the show, and it's going to be a great time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Peace and love.